we get to the point of removing the belt from the alternator and the AC compressor, and look at our problem. Here it is. And listen to that. See the play in it? Too much play. That's one, and I'll spin it for you and maybe you can hear the sound it's making. You hear that grinding? The bearing's shot. So what we have to do is get to a 10 millimeter bolt that holds on this pressure plate. As you all can see, we have not even a finger's width of room. That's all we have to get that pressure plate out and also the clutch off, the pulley. I've already loosened the radiator hose at the bottom of the radiator. Move the rest of the hose and that housing right here. So this will take the thermostat housing and the hose to the radiator completely out of the way. We believe we have enough play in these lines to get that compressor up a little bit so that we can remove the 10 millimeter bolt on the pressure plate and get this clutch pulley off and replace the bearing. Behind this is a magnetic coil where these wires are. All right, y'all, we're gonna remove the thermostat housing. Takes a 10 millimeter. I'm gonna crack it loose on the bottom here with a 1/4 inch drive. If I continue to use this ratchet, I'm gonna be coming up against this compressor, so I can't. We've put some plastic underneath so if there's any radiator fluid coming out, any coolant, it won't get to our electrical connector on the AC compressor. So that one's cracked loose. Now I'm gonna do the top. The one on the top needs an extension because the neck of this gets in the way. The neck of the coolant or the thermostat housing gets in the way. Loosen this a little and then start taking the bottom. I'm using an offset wrench to take out the bottom. Unless you remove the oil filter, it's a little difficult to get to it with an open-end wrench. So I'm gonna leave that there while I take the top one a bit. Taking the top one off. Oh, yes. And to let you know, we have a container underneath, a basin to catch all the coolant that comes out. So now we're going to remove this hose. We had quite a bit of coolant come out, so we cleaned that up, and as you see, it's still wicking. So we're just going to keep shoving some paper towels in there. We don't want on the electrical connection of the AC. What I have right there is a pan to catch some of the coolant underneath the car, and a drip pan, metal drip pan. Another thing, y'all, disconnect the negative cable on your battery. We've already done that because, again, we're working on the car. What we're going to do now is loosen these 3 12 millimeter bolts, one there, and one right directly behind these lines. I'm going to use an extension for the bottom ones, or at least the one I have to get to right through there. After we do that, our current plan, we don't know if it will work, is to use this 4x4 to put directly down and wedge against this part of the frame and the oil pan down here to support this and bring it up just a little bit so that we can get to the pressure plate bolt and release it. That pressure plate bolt is only held on with 10 foot-pounds. I've gone to a 1/4 inch socket because the extension for the 3/8 doesn't want to fit in between these lines. We're going to try this. Got a little cheater bar on it. Y'all want to be careful because the ratchet can get stuck up against this fan. So don't take it out all the way with a ratchet. This side with a 3/8 with an extension so I don't hit the electrical. Once you get them cracked or loose, you can just really take them like that. What we're going to do now is take these bolts out, and then we'll be back to show you the setup we have because we need 4 hands for this. Y'all, we're going to take the 2 bolts at the bottom out first. Leave the one on the top. All of them are already loosened because there's a lot of weight on this. So somebody's going to be supporting this AC compressor while somebody else is removing the top bolt. We have a 4x4 piece of wood right there that's about 8.5. It looks just like that. That's about 8.5 inches long. that we're resting the compressor on. That's that 10mm bolt right there, y'all, that otherwise will spin freely if the AC is not engaged. There are 3 parts to this you've got to be concerned about. This is the pressure plate right here. It's being held by that 10mm bolt, and that's 10 foot-pounds. There's a snap ring that holds that in place you have to get off. Behind that, where these electrical leads are attached to, is the magnetic coil. We're not going to remove that or replace it because we don't think we have a problem with it. That's held in by a snap ring. But the problem people have is they can't access that 10mm bolt so close to this part of the car. So we don't want to crack the lines and evacuate the system, so this is why we're choosing to do it this way with the compressor still in the car and the refrigerant lines not cracked. So now we have to loosen that, and we'll show you how we're going to do that. But that's the bolt right there you have to get out. We got the 10mm bolt loose, and we'll show you how we did it. Sister is holding a large pair of channel locks around that pressure plate right there, and I'll move the ratchet in a minute to let you know so you can see it more clearly. That's a 3/8 ratchet with a 10mm socket on it. I used a cheater bar, just a piece of metal, yeah, right there, that my sister just lifted, to get above and away from her hands. Bring that up and get away from her hands because it's too tight in there. So here's how this looks. Ratchets on it, right there. Sister's holding those channel locks. While she was holding it, I was loosening that bolt and trying to keep one hand on that compressor so it doesn't move, and it did a good job. So it released that 10mm. I'm going to remove, it's just hand tight now, this 10mm bolt you'll see coming out in a minute so we can get that pressure plate off. There she is.
But that's a little bit of Loctite on it.
Yep,
242 blue.
Sister pointed out we think that's a little bit of thread lock, Loctite, 242. Keep that bolt on. So we're going to put a little back on when we put her in. I'm going to try to take the pressure plate off now. She comes right off. All right, so now the pressure plate comes off, y'all. That's what the pressure plate looks like on the back. That is your pressure plate on the opposite side that you would see if it's on. Right inside that hole, Sister's pointing to with the pencil, are supposed to be your shims. We call them spacers. Check it out. The shims are supposed to be in there because this pressure plate has to be gapped from that pulley. Those are my shims right there that have been dislodged and are hanging out. Watch this, y'all. They're magnetically held on. Right there, that's a magnetic area. This is the magnetic coil back there. When we pulled that pressure plate off, these little shims are supposed to actually be
inside there.
Inside here. So what happened is, as we removed it, they actually hung on to the magnetic surface. So the moral of the story is, when you're removing that pressure plate, you want to be very careful because you have to have these shims. These shims let you know the distance that this pressure plate has to be from this pulley right here. Whatever you take out, put back on. If you take the pressure plate out and aren't being careful, they can drop down there and you'll lose one. So just be very careful. You want to put back on what you take off. All right, y'all, right inside this area, the pressure plate has been removed. That's the bearing, the green you see right back there. There's a snap ring. I'm trying to show you right here. I think you can see it. See those indentations and the flare-outs? That's a snap ring. It moves back and forth. You got to be able to get that snap ring out. The bearing on this is toast. That's why it's wobbling back and forth, the pulley, and that's why it's making a little bit of a grinding noise. Y'all, I didn't tell you earlier, now's a good time to tell you. When you're working on your AC unit on your car or your house, wear safety glasses. This is what I'm wearing, some safety glasses, because this unit, this AC unit, is under high pressure because of the refrigerant in it. So you want to make sure you're wearing some sort of safety glasses, because if the refrigerant gives way, It's high, high pressure, and it can harm you. Wear some safety glasses.
I got one side off. I'm gonna lift it off. There it is.
All right, y'all, that's the snap ring we took out. That's the one that an auto parts store said would fit my car. It clearly doesn't because it's too big. So we're going to be reusing that. Keep your original parts just in case what you're given at the auto parts store doesn't work. It's certainly coming now, y'all. Starting to get easier to turn, so she's going to be giving way. I'm going to try to pull her off by hand now, see if she comes. There she is. So that's what the little beast looks like. See the green area? That's the bearing. That's the end of the tool right there. Now Sister will show you.
Pushing on that shaft, which is magnetic. See, it just kind of wants to stay there.
So that's what's holding that on. Now, I'll show you the tool. Here's the tool that AutoZone loaned me. It's OEM part number 27001. AC clutch pulley puller, and it did a good job. The way you set it up, those jaws right there have to be behind your pulley, and there's one on each side.
Right there.
Then, when you get tension on it, and you can see that those are adjustable. Can you point to these screws right there? There you go. Those are adjustable. Once you get those on, perfect. You get that bolt in the center of that shaft on your pulley, and then you start tightening that with a 3/4 inch socket. And that's what removed that pulley for us. We're going to replace the bearing now in this pulley. There are little tabs. See that? I'll point to them with a screwdriver. Right there. Those hold the bearing in. So we're taking this little tiny screwdriver so we can fit it right there, y'all. See that? Then we're going to pound that with a hammer and pound that tab back. After we install the other bearing, we're going to push those little tabs over so they hold in the other bearing. All we did was take this little screwdriver and a hammer, position it at one of the tabs, then give it a hit. We're going to remove the bearing from this pulley. What you want to use to remove it is something like a socket that will fit around the interior race of this bearing. We're using a 27 millimeter. You don't want to use something that will cover or hit that plastic area of the bearing. So this one, for example, which is the 30, would be too big because it hits the plastic part of that bearing, the shield there. You want to use, again, we're using a 27 millimeter. So we've got that there, and we're going to give it a wacky doodle with a hammer. We've got two pieces, little pieces of 2x4 set up so that the 2x4 is resting right here. So the 2x4 fits like this. At some point, the bearing will start to come out, and it may exceed the depth of these. At that point of the 2x4 sitting right there. At that point, we'll simply move it to there.
Or we'll get more wood.
Sister's going to use her massive strength and take it like a child. Yes. See that, y'all? She coming out now. Boom. And she out. Lovely. Okay. So this is what came out, y'all.
That looks like that
Yeah.
dust cover.
So here's the bearing. I'm going to read you all the actual part number of this bearing. It's a Nachi, and that's spelled N-A-C-H-I. This is an OEM bearing. The part number on it is 30, B like boy, G like George, S like Sam, 10, D like David, S like Sam, T like Tom, 2. However, if you all go to order this part, you need to make sure it's made in Japan, not China. There are knockoffs from China. Don't buy that. I did not buy this one. I'll show you the part number I put. This is a notchy bearing. It's the same dimensions as this bearing right here. You need the same dimensions to go back in your pulley. This is made in Japan. The model number of the one I'm putting in, the new one, is 30, B like boy, G like George, 5222, U like Union, U like Union, S like Sam. We're going to clean this up now, put a little bit of emery cloth in the middle of this pulley and just clean her up and then put in the new bearing. Your bearing is specific to your air conditioning unit. Whatever your compressor is, your bearing is specific to the model number of your compressor. I'll give you my model number. The model number of my compressor is 10, P like Paul, A like Adam, 17, C like Charles. That is important to know when you go to purchase a bearing because you need the same dimensions on the bearing as your old bearing. Okay, y'all, now we're going to be installing the new bearing in the pulley. We've had the pulley sitting out in the hot sun. It's probably, 98 degrees. We've had it sitting out in the hot sun to expand the metal a little bit. And I'm going to go in my sister's going to go get that. I'm going to go in the house and get the bearing that's been in the freezer since this morning. It's been in the freezer for hours. We hope that the expansion on the metal on the pulley from the heat and the contraction on the metal on the bearing in the freezer will help us get it in easier. We're going to use the bearing we just took out to put it in along with our trusty piece of wood. There it is, y'all. We put the piece back in, this little piece. Thinner part goes in first and the shoulder goes in last. We drop that in. Here's our new bearing, fresh out of the freezer. Go. Okay, wait, something's happening. It's going in like butter, y'all. Okay.
That's probably it. Let's see.
Ooh, that went in so nice. So we think it's flush here, y'all, and we can inset those tangs. All right, y'all, she's in. What you want to look for, and I'll point it out with a dental tool. We're looking at where the bearing meets that shouldered area of this. It's really a dust cover. And it's right up against, we can feel it with this dental tool. It's right up against the little shoulder or flared out part of this dust cover. There's no gap, no space. There's nothing to pound into anymore, and you don't want to deform this piece. And we felt along here and looked at it with a magnifying glass. Our eyes aren't that great. And she appears to be flush. So that's what she looks like, y'all. If you can see, Sister was pointing out the tang right there is just meeting that metal. It's just a little above it. And that means we can use that screwdriver and press that over that bearing, that little tang, to keep that in place. Don't forget to press those tangs back into place after you put your bearing on. That's what holds this bearing in. All right, we're going to put the tangs back in place. All right, y'all, we're going to put the pulley on. Now, here's the thing with the pulley you guys have to be very aware of. That snap ring, whether it's the original, which ours is, we're going to reuse it. Remember the one we got, the Santec was too large. Whether you reuse yours or you get a new one, what you have to be aware of is one side is flat, that's this side, y'all, and one side is beveled, that's this side. And the way you can tell, I'm going to get a dental tool and show you. You're looking for that, see that metal line right there? That's there because this area below it, this darkened middle area, dives in and hides itself. Doesn't get touched. That is the bevel that the Toyota manual talks about. That bevel faces the outside. When you're putting that pulley in, this will go toward you. The beveled side goes up toward you. You'll see the beveled side, and the flat side will go against the pulley. Right, y'all, now we're going to put the big bird in. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a tiny little piece of wood, and we're going to stick it up under. Sister's going to put it under while I raise this compressor. Okay, and the reason we're going to do that is we want to tilt that back a bit so Sister can have access to it to pound on it. See how she's doing that a little bit at a time.
There we go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to put the snap ring on. The beveled side goes out like this, or what Toyota manual calls up. So when you put it in, it goes, it's facing you. The bevel side is facing you like that. Tilt it up just a bit. All right, y'all, the snap ring is in place, and now we're going to put the pressure plate on. Here's what the Toyota manual calls for. It calls for shims, or a gap between the pressure plate and the pulley that's on the car of 0.5 plus or minus 0.15 millimeters. We have this feeler gauge, this little gapper, and we could gap it with this, but we can't get this gauge behind this pressure plate when it's on the car, on the pulley, up against the pulley. So for that reason, we're going to put the shims in that came out. There were 2 shims that came out, and we'll go back into this splined area of the pressure plate. We've got the pressure plate on now, the shims are in place. We're gonna put our bolt in, but not tighten it, because when we put it in on its final run, when we're going to seat it, we're going to put a little thread lock on there. So we're going to put that back in there right now. And we're going to test her to make sure she engages, that the coil, magnetic coil on the back here, sucks that in. Just hand tightening that nut. What you're going to see is us testing the coil to see if it engages that pressure plate. So we have the compressor hooked up to the battery via some gator clips. Sister's going to touch the negative lead on the gator clip from the compressor to the battery. We have it set up, and we'll show you the setup after we show you the test. So what you're looking for is this. If this works, if the coil works and the pressure plate works and the whole clutch assembly works, what's going to happen is the magnetic coil back here, where the leads are going to suck that pressure plate in. Now, I want you to see, before we test it, that the pulley spins freely without the pressure plate spinning. It turns independent of it. Once my sister touches the lead to the negative on the battery, it's going to suck in this pressure plate. When that happens, if this works, everything will turn together. The reason I have to show it to you this way is we do not have the compressor mounted on the car, and I have to hold the compressor and turn this with one hand because there's quite a bit of resistance. So again, this is moving freely now without the pressure plate moving. Once she touches the gator clip to the negative on the battery, pressure plate's going to engage, and the pressure plate and the pulley will move in unison. So here we go. Go ahead, Beck, do it. Hold. You see how the pressure plate's moving and the pulley's moving? Okay, stop. And now the pulley is moving freely. Do it again, please. See how everything's moving together? This works. So now we know the coil's working, pressure plate's working, pulley's working. We don't have the jiggling anymore, and we don't have that grinding noise draw on that. So here's our setup. We have gator clips from this area. You remove this part of the electrical connection, and inside there's a little prong. We hooked up this gator clip to that prong, and let it over here to the battery and put it on the positive side of the battery. Our negative is hooked up to that ground right there, the black negative. That is going over to the battery right there. And sister touches that black gator clip lead to it. She won't right now, but she touches. Oh, she did it.
I just wanted to let them see the spark. Don't get freaked out about the spark.
See the spark? No big deal. Okay, so to test this, to see whether the coil is working, the clutch is engaging, the pressure plate, you can't just touch it to the negative on the battery. You have to touch and hold in order for it to engage, and then you try to move it and see if the pressure plate moves with the pulley. Ours does, it works. We have success on this. We just wanted to test it before we torque that 10mm bolt in the center of that pressure plate down to 10 foot-pounds per the Toyota manual. All right, y'all, the 10mm bolt has a little bit of thread lock on it. See that blue stuff? I'm using Permatex Thread Locker Blue 24200. You have to shake it really well before you apply it. All right, y'all, we put thread lock on the 10mm bolt, put that in hand tight. Sister is using these channel locks to keep that pressure plate stationary. Without the channel locks on, it just spins and spins and spins. Put channel locks on the shoulders of that pressure plate, and I'm going to torque it at 10 foot-pounds. This entire job cost me $12.88 for the new bearing. I got that off of eBay. We got the loaner tools from AutoZone. We love AutoZone. And that allowed us to pull the pulley off. We did not want to discharge the system for obvious reasons. You open up the system. If you open up a system, an AC system in a car, you have to replace the dryer receiver. And then you have to vacuum out the system, and then you have to recharge it with refrigerant. We didn't want to do that if we didn't have to. What we wanted to show you is how to replace anything in your clutch assembly, be it the pressure plate, the pulley, some people call it a clutch, or the coil, the magnetic coil, without discharging the refrigerant on your car. Some people buy this unit, the clutch assembly, pressure plate, pulley, magnetic coil, all together and just replace it all. The issue they run into is the wiring configuration is not the same. So you have to somehow configure that together. I like to keep my OEM parts, which I was able to do with a nice new bearing made in Japan. So this worked out really well. All right, y'all, we're mounting the AC compressor back onto the engine. 3 bolts, 18 foot-pounds torque spec on them. All right, mounted back on the engine. And that is how you replace a pulley bearing in a 1995 Toyota Camry without discharging the AC lines. We hope it helps, and happy DIY.